Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
There's a kind of silence that sits under the noise of a family gathering, a hum of something unspoken, like a low, emotional tinnitus, and I've lived in that silence for most of my life. My family is loud, shiny, proud. We are not huggers, not really. We are performers. Every Thanksgiving, the same performance repeats like a damn Broadway matinee. Golden brown turkey, too sweet cranberry sauce, my sister Allison's over-decorated tablescape with white pumpkins and ironic, grateful napkins, and the godforsaken family photo at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon. Sharp, on time, curated, and every year I'm missing from it. Not visibly missing, no. Not in the way someone dead or exiled would be. It's subtler than that. I'm just not there. The timing's off. Or they didn't know where I went. Or thought you left early. Once, Allison said she figured I was in the bathroom. The bathroom, for a full 30-minute golden hour photo shoot? That kind of accidental. It's not like I'm invisible in real life. I exist. I'm there. I bring the damn pumpkin pie every year, made from scratch with a recipe that's older than my mother's guilt trips. I show up. I laugh at the bad jokes. I pour wine. I ask how their kids are doing in ballet or college or whatever hobby they're Instagram bragging about this year. But when the shutter clicks, I vanish. Last year, I was standing at the kitchen counter, swirling whipped cream onto the pie with the back of a spoon, when I heard them all gathering out on the back patio. Chairs scraping, glasses clinking. I looked out the window, and there they were, Allison, Trent, their spouses, their kids, even my mother, who never leaves her recliner unless she smells attention. They were all lined up in their carefully chosen shades of fall beige and burnt orange, like a damn Macy's ad. Everyone smiling, some forced, some perfect. Allison's husband, Doug, was setting the timer on his phone. I watched him press the button. 10 seconds. 9. 8. No one looked toward the kitchen. No one said, "Where's Sam?" Not even once. I could have walked out there. I could have stuck my head into the frame or screamed something wildly inappropriate just to burn the moment into memory. But I didn't. I stood there, holding the pie, a stupid swirl of cream wilting at the edges, and I just stared. The timer blinked. The shutter clicked. Laughter echoed. And I stayed where I was, alone, uninvited, deliberately unimportant. They didn't mention it after. Not a word. Not even a casual, "Oh, we missed you in the photo." Nothing. Like it was perfectly natural for the only unmarried, childless, 40-something woman in the family to disappear when the flash went off. Like I was a stray dog in the yard they'd hoped wouldn't bark. I drove home that night in silence, the radio off, pie dish in the passenger's seat still full because no one touched it. My phone buzzed with the usual, "Thank you for coming." Texts, all exclamation points and emojis, as fake as Allison's eyelashes. And then, the next morning, I saw it. Facebook. Allison had posted the photo, sunlit and filtered to death, with the caption, "Everyone's here. So grateful for family." 86 likes. 11 comments. I scrolled through, slowly, reading the compliments about her hair and her perfect family and the amazing decor. No one asked where I was. No one noticed I wasn't there. Except I was. I had been in the kitchen, 30 feet away, spooning whipped cream like an unpaid caterer. That was the moment something cracked open in me, not loud, not dramatic. Just a small tear, like a stitch giving out in a worn-out dress. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat on my couch, still in my jeans, and stared at that photo until it felt like I could walk into it and scream. But I didn't. Not then. Instead, I downloaded the photo. Opened Photoshop. Cropped it tighter. Erased someone's kid to the right. Erased Doug's wine glass. Centered Allison. Made it even cleaner, even more perfect. Then I saved it under a new file name. Thanksgiving Liars, Final Cut. I didn't know it then, but that photo would stay on my desktop for 11 months. I would look at it every time I doubted what I knew was true. Every time I wondered if maybe I was overreacting or being sensitive or dramatic like my father used to accuse me of when I was a teenager. But I wasn't. Because when someone excludes you over and over again, not loudly, not cruelly, but subtly and consistently, they're not just forgetting. They're choosing. And this year, I'm choosing back. Because I may have been missing from the photo, but I wasn't gone. And this year, they're going to remember exactly who the hell I am. Some people grow up with warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. They fall asleep on their mother's laps. They laugh too loud at the dinner table. They get scolded for sneaking cookies and hugged twice before bed, just in case the first one didn't land right. That wasn't me. I was the one who shut the cabinet doors softly, who watched from the hallway, who learned early how to make herself small enough not to be a bother. In a house full of performers, I was the crew behind the curtain, always there, but not for applause. Allison was the star from the beginning, born blonde and radiant with perfect timing and a gift for making any room feel like it was lucky just to have her in it. Trent was the golden boy, baseball MVP in high school, business major by 20, engagement ring on his college sweetheart's finger before the rest of us knew they were serious. Then there was me, Samantha, Sam for short, though no one really used it. My mother called me the serious one, as if that were a compliment, but you could hear the ache of disappointment woven into her voice like thread through a hem. Dad never said much to me that didn't sound like a joke. He'd ruffle Trent's hair and tell Allison how proud he was of her, then turn to me with a grin and say something like, "Don't worry, Sam won't cause any trouble. She's practically furniture." And everyone would laugh, even me sometimes, because when you're a kid, you learn quickly how to laugh at your own invisibility before someone else makes it a punchline. I didn't fight it. Not back then. I slipped through school like a shadow, quiet in classrooms, polite in conversations, always careful not to take up too much space. I got good grades, but didn't put my report cards on the fridge. I won a regional essay contest once and folded the certificate into a drawer before anyone saw it. Attention made me nervous. Praise felt like a spotlight I hadn't earned. But I was watching, always watching. While Allison played social butterfly and Trent practiced his swing, I was building small, quiet worlds of my own. I'd take apart old radios, rewire broken lamps, read business magazines at the library while everyone else was at the mall. By the time I turned 24, I'd built a rudimentary e-commerce platform in my apartment on a second-hand laptop with a cracked screen and a fan that sounded like a jet engine when it got too hot. I didn't have investors. I didn't even have a business degree. But I had time, obsession, and the kind of solitude that fuels long hours and makes you fall in love with control. I launched my first tech startup in 2011, a logistics tool that helps small online retailers automate shipping and returns. It was ugly, clunky, and brilliant. 3 years later, it got picked up by a mid-tier distribution company for what they called a strategic acquisition. The check I received had more zeros than I had expected. In 2014, I doubled my investment of 20 grand and ended up with over 150,000. Not bad for someone who was called a distraction. And I never told them. Not once. Because I knew exactly what they'd say. They'd nod and smile and twist it into a fluke. They'd tell me how proud they were in that vague, foggy way people do when they don't really care. Or worse, they'd use it as ammunition in future conversations, mentioning it at dinner like it was a funny little anecdote, another one of Sam's weird quirks. The girl who built something and didn't even tell her family, can you imagine? I started buying nicer clothes, but nothing flashy. I drove a reliable car with heated seats and tinted windows, because privacy mattered more to me than horsepower. I traveled sometimes, alone, with a carry-on and an itinerary that didn't include group photos. When Trent posted vacation pics from Cancun and Allison live-streamed her daughter's ballet recitals, I stayed silent. I liked being a ghost with a bank account. But last year, that silence started to feel like a punishment I hadn't deserved. watching them all laugh on the patio while I stood with a pie in my hand and not a single person glanced my way. It cut deeper than I expected. And maybe it wasn't just the photo. Maybe it was the decades of being forgotten in plain sight. The kind of invisibility that makes you question if you've ever really existed in someone else's memory, or if you've only ever been a supporting character in their glossy little world. Then, a week before Thanksgiving, my phone lit up. It was Allison, of course. She only texted when it was convenient, birthdays, holidays, or when she needed a yes for a head count. This one read, "Hope you can make it to Thanksgiving this year. Try not to disappear when we take the photo again." She added a laughing emoji at the end, like that would soften the slap of it. Like she wasn't making the same joke my father used to make about me vanishing into the wallpaper. I stared at the message longer than I should have. I could feel my pulse in my temples, a low, steady thud that made the room feel smaller. This time, I didn't laugh. This time, I didn't feel invisible. This time, I started planning. There's a very particular kind of tension that builds in your chest when you're headed somewhere you don't want to be but know you can't skip, not without inviting a dozen passive-aggressive remarks, guilt-laced comments from your mother. And those long silences that somehow scream louder than yelling. That's what Thanksgiving morning felt like this year. Like walking into a room where every picture frame is slightly tilted and no one will admit they notice. I parked 2 houses down because the driveway was already full, Trent's new Cadillac and Allison's Range Rover taking up more space than necessary, like they were marking territory. I stepped out with a bottle of wine tucked under one arm and my pie, once again, homemade from scratch, balanced in a carrier I'd bought in Vermont. It was a small detail, probably meaningless to them, but it mattered to me, something beautiful and precise in a day that would be anything but. The house looked the same as it always did on holidays, over-decorated to the point of parody, with fake leaves taped to the windows and a scarecrow on the porch so stiff it might as well have been my father in retirement. I knocked once before letting myself in, greeted not by a person, but by the smell of roasting turkey and a playlist of classic rock turned down just low enough to make conversation awkward. No one came to the door, of course. They never do. The assumption is that I'll just quietly show up, fade into the background, and start helping with something. And I always do. Allison came around the corner in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than the rent on my first apartment, holding a wooden spoon like it was part of her costume. She smiled that photo-ready smile of hers, leaned in for an air kiss that didn't touch my cheek, and told me how glad she was I could make it. I smiled back with every ounce of control I had, told her the wine was from Sonoma, and handed over the pie like I was handing off a prop in a play. Trent showed up 10 minutes later with his usual swagger, wearing a beige sweater that matched his wife's scarf, both of them looking like they'd stepped off the cover of a fall fashion catalog. They kissed Mom on the cheek, high-fived their kids, and barely registered my existence. I got a nod from Trent and a "Hey, look who's here" from his wife, and that was the full extent of my welcome. The hours passed in that dull, grating way family gatherings always do when you don't belong but can't leave. Conversation revolved entirely around Trent's new boat, something called a Catalina 35, and Allison's daughter's upcoming recital, which would be streamed online and might even get picked up by local news. I sat there with my glass of wine, swirling it slowly, nodding at the right moments, pretending I wasn't counting every minute that ticked by on the grandfather clock in the hallway. No one asked what I'd been up to. No one asked how my work was going. No one asked if I was seeing anyone or where I lived these days, or if I'd done anything worth talking about. It was like watching a play you've seen 100 times, only now you know every line, and you're not in it anymore. You're in the audience, half bored, half stunned that they still think the script is working. Around 2 o'clock, I stepped out into the backyard to take a call from my lawyer, a short conversation about contracts and wire transfers that ended with, "We're good to go once you sign." I lingered for a moment after, letting the cold air clear my head. I remember thinking how sharp the wind felt against my face, like it was trying to remind me I was real, that I existed, even if no one inside that house noticed. When I walked back in through the sliding door, I saw them gathering. The chairs had been arranged perfectly under the oak tree. Allison was fluffing her daughter's curls. Trent adjusted his collar. Doug was setting the timer on his phone, just like last year. My mother stood off to the side, wrinkled hands smoothing the front of her sweater as if that would make her look more loving in the shot. No one turned around. No one looked for me. No one said, "Wait, where's Sam?" I froze there, just inside the door, watching through the glass as the countdown ticked down on Doug's phone. 10, 9, 8. They all smiled. Someone raised a glass. Click. And just like that, it was done again. For the third year in a row, I wasn't in the picture. I laughed. Not a loud laugh, not one that made them turn around. Just a low, bitter chuckle that escaped before I could stop it, sharp and dry like something breaking in my throat. I turned, walked slowly back through the kitchen, past the untouched pie, past the perfectly aligned buffet table, through the hallway where photos of my siblings lined the walls like a museum exhibit. I opened the front door, stepped into the cold, and walked to my rental car. I sat inside for a long moment, the quiet wrapping around me like a familiar friend. Then I opened my laptop, connected to my hotspot, and pulled up the draft email I'd written weeks earlier, but hadn't had the courage to send. Subject line: Aerial banner approval message body. Approve aerial banner for Thursday. Final message attached. I stared at it for a second longer than necessary, then hit send. If they wanted a Thanksgiving to remember, they were about to get one. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the kind of chill that seeps into your bones if you're not careful, the kind that carries with it the weight of old memories and things unsaid, the kind of air that smells like gravy and grief. But I wasn't there this time, not stepping through their front door with a pie in hand and a smile I didn't mean. I wasn't parked 2 houses down rehearsing lines in my head about how work's been good, or it's nice to see everyone again while I waited to be ignored. This year, I was 3 towns over, wrapped in a hotel bathrobe, eating scrambled eggs out of a carton while the morning news played in the background. The curtains were pulled open just enough to let in the gray light, and my phone was already buzzing with texts from clients and lawyers, none of whom gave a damn whether I showed up for turkey and fake family love. By 11:45, I was on my second cup of coffee, the one I always drink too fast and regret almost immediately. I checked the time again, this strange electricity buzzing under my skin as the hour hand crept toward noon. The plan wasn't complicated, just precise. I'd written the message myself, paid for the custom banner, contracted a pilot with a license and a grudge against the holidays, and submitted the flight path to ensure they couldn't ignore it. I'd done all of it with the same quiet precision I'd used to build my business from a junk laptop in a 1-bedroom apartment 10 years ago. I didn't want to ruin Thanksgiving. I wanted to be remembered in it. Back at their house, the house I grew up in, the house that never once displayed one of my awards or photos or handmade cards, they were already knee-deep in wine and traditions that didn't include me. Allison probably handed out embroidered napkins with each guest's initials stitched onto them by a local artisan. Trent was likely halfway through a story about the time he nearly ran out of gas in the middle of the bay but navigated home by instinct, like some sea-drenched prophet. And my mother, I'm sure, was seated in the corner chair, her legs covered with a knit throw, talking softly about how she used to host 30 people before her back started giving out. None of them knew what was coming until they heard it, that faint, steady buzz in the distance like a lawn mower riding the wind. It crept in slowly at first, barely louder than the clink of silverware on plates, then rising, sharpening, until it was undeniable. The sound made conversation pause. Glasses stopped midair. Heads turned toward the backyard where they always posed for photos, and someone, I'd bet it was Doug, was the first to speak. "What the hell is that?" They moved toward the patio in a confused shuffle, eyes squinting against the pale sky, the wind tugging at Allison's hair as she shielded her eyes and scanned the horizon. And then they saw it. A small plane, cutting cleanly through the clouds, towing a banner that whipped and flapped with perfect drama, just enough lag to make it readable, just enough flair to make it undeniable. I took this photo alone right before I closed a $10 million deal. Happy Thanksgiving. I imagine it hit them all in stages. First confusion, then recognition, then the inevitable silence that follows a moment too big for words. Trent must have cursed first. He always did when he lost control of a situation. Allison would have gone white, her fingers clenched around the stem of her wine glass, lips twitching as if searching for some way to spin it, to make it seem like a joke. Like I hadn't just taken the nuclear option and painted my pain across the sky like a skywriter in a revenge flick. My mother, though. I don't know how she reacted exactly, but when I watched the footage later, I saw her eyes rise slowly, the lines on her face folding deeper, the recognition dawning not as anger, but something closer to shame. She knew. Somewhere beneath her curated layers of holiday denial, she must have known what this was about, even if she hadn't admitted it for decades. I watched it all from my hotel room. Not live, but on a crisp little video feed, captured by a drone I'd paid extra to have stationed across the street. It floated steady, like a witness with no skin in the game, capturing the scene in full HD as the family splintered apart in confusion and disbelief. The drone panned down just as Allison turned toward the house, her hand flying up to her mouth, and I could see the words forming even before she said them. It's Sam. Not Samantha. Not our sister. Just Sam, like a punchline that finally got its teeth back. I sat cross-legged on the bed, dipping fries into spicy mayo, a slow grin stretching across my face as the moment played again. And again. And again. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. What I felt was relief. Not joy, not triumph, but a loosening in my chest like something that had been coiled tight for years was finally starting to unravel. Then my phone buzzed. Not a text from a client or a lawyer. Not a bank notification or another spam call. It was a name I hadn't seen light up my screen in years. Maddie. Allison's daughter. 17 years old. Ballet kid. Oversharer on Instagram. She'd barely spoken to me at Thanksgiving in the past. Always too busy on her phone, too polite in that robotic way teenagers learn from watching adults lie with their smiles. I hesitated for a second, then answered. Aunt Sam, she said, her voice small, almost shaky. I didn't know you felt that way. Why didn't you ever say something? And I froze, because out of all the things I'd planned, all the possibilities I'd run through in my head, this was the one I hadn't seen coming. For a few seconds, I couldn't answer her. Maddie's voice just hung there on the line, floating between us like something too delicate to touch. She sounded so unsure of herself, so much smaller than I remembered, like she was reaching across a canyon she hadn't realized existed until today. It wasn't the question itself that threw me. God knows I'd asked myself 1,000 variations of it over the years. It was the fact that she actually asked, that someone finally broke the family script long enough to see the cracks beneath the paint. I cleared my throat and said her name, once, softly, just to buy time. There's no handbook for this moment, no neat little speech that makes decades of being forgotten suddenly make sense. I sat there in the hotel chair, legs curled under me, half-empty takeout containers on the table, and stared at the muted television screen while I tried to find the words. She deserved something honest. But I wasn't sure she was ready for the kind of truth that doesn't make anyone feel better. I didn't say anything. I told her finally, because I figured no one would care. There was a pause on her end. I could hear her breathing, that kind of quiet where you know someone is trying not to cry. Then she asked it, the second question, the harder one. Do you regret it? Her voice cracked just slightly at the end, and I could feel the weight of the moment shifting. Because I knew she didn't mean just the banner. She meant the whole thing. The years of silence, the absence, the choice to walk away and never fight to be seen again. Did I regret it? I opened my mouth to answer, but what came out instead was a question I hadn't planned. Maddie, do you remember the last time I was in the family photo? More silence. Exactly, I said. And that's the point. Later that night, after she hung up, After she whispered that she hoped I wasn't mad at her for calling, after she promised to send me something she drew, because apparently she's been sketching lately and no one in the family ever asked to see. I sat by the window in that hotel room and played her words back in my mind. I knew they weren't mine to keep, but I held them anyway, like a fragile shell I'd found washed up unexpectedly on a cold beach. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I closed my eyes, but my brain kept running marathons in the dark. Sometime around 4 in the morning, I checked my email. There it was, Trent's message. Short, direct, and just salty enough to qualify as an insult hiding behind professionalism. Nice stunt. You made Mom cry. You owe us an apology. At least try to act like family. No greeting. No signature. Just that. I scrolled past it without reading it twice. Then came the voicemail from my mother, her voice thin and warbling like a violin, just slightly out of tune. She said she didn't understand what had gotten into me. Said the family had always done their best. Said I'd embarrassed everyone in the neighborhood and ruined a perfectly good holiday. Then she started to cry, not sobbing, but that wounded kind of weeping people do when they're more angry than hurt. She mentioned the word dignity at least twice, as if that's what I stole from her. But I hadn't stolen anything. I had just held up a mirror. So I didn't call her back. I didn't respond to Trent. I didn't type out a carefully worded message trying to explain my feelings to people who had never once asked to understand them. Instead, I opened my camera roll and scrolled back to a photo I'd taken 2 months earlier. I was sitting at a cafe in Lisbon, laughing mid-sip with a glass of champagne in one hand and a croissant on the table, half-eaten and buttery. The sun hit my face at the perfect angle, catching a glint in my eyes I didn't recognize until that night. I looked like someone fully alive. No filters. No family. No expectations. I attached the photo to an email, addressed it to the entire family group thread, and typed one sentence in the body. I like this one better. No sign-off. No explanation. Then I hit send and turned off my phone. 3 months passed. I didn't hear a word from anyone. Not Trent. Not Allison. Not even my mother, whose silence was louder than any voicemail she could have left. I moved through winter like someone who had finally stepped outside after holding her breath for too long. I traveled. I read books. I took long walks in unfamiliar cities and listened to music I hadn't let myself enjoy in years. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to pull me back into the role I'd outgrown. And then, in early spring, I found myself on a beach in Costa Rica, sipping something strong and citrusy from a sweating glass, toes buried in the warm sand, eyes closed against the sun. I wasn't thinking about family. I wasn't thinking about anything, really, just letting the sound of waves do what therapy sometimes can't. I heard footsteps approach, but didn't open my eyes. Then I heard her voice, uncertain, but close. "Aunt Sam, mind if I join you for this year's family photo?" I turned. It was Maddie. She stood there in jean shorts and a t-shirt too big for her frame, holding a little sketchbook in one hand and squinting into the sun like she didn't quite believe she'd made it. Her hair was pulled back, and there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before, maybe recognition, maybe apology, maybe something better. I smiled and nodded, scooted over in the sand, and held up my phone without saying a word. We took the picture, no banner, no audience, no forced smiles. Just the two of us. 2 women from the same family, finally seen by someone. And maybe that's the real twist. After all the noise, after the stunts and silence and years of being erased, the only person who ever really noticed I was gone was the one who was still learning how not to disappear herself. So, was I right to do it? Did I become the cold, distant person they always warned me I would? Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I know for sure. If it takes closing a $10 million deal for your family to finally see you, then maybe they never really saw you at all. And the real question still lingers, quiet but sharp. Why did it take all that, just to be counted?